Pretty much every TCG ever printed was designed with the express purpose of playing competitively head-to-head against other players to determine a single winner. Even the Austin Powers TCG is designed for that express purpose. However, I think historically, some TCGs have done it better than others. Whether it be through their inherent mechanics or their publisher's support for competitive events, some TCGs simply prove a more rewarding experience to climb the ranks and fight the highest level of competition. Today I'm going to be going over my 5 picks for what I think are the best TCGs to play competitively right now. The ones that will provide you the best experience if you are a serious competitive player who wants to rise through the ranks and see how well you can do. And no, Austin Powers is not going to be on this list. Let's jump into it. What's up, everyone? It's Dan with Main Deck, and today, like I said, we're going through what I think are the top 5 competitive TCGs that you could be playing right now in 2023 to get your serious competitive fix. Before I jump into this, I want to go through the criteria that I used to make this list, and I want to remind you that these are my personal opinions and personal picks. You might have your own, so go ahead and leave a comment down below if you disagree with me or if you think there are any TCGs that I left out that should be on this list. I promise I probably considered your game, and hey, it might have been my number 6 or something, but based on the criteria I'm going to show you here, this is what I used to sort of weight my list and how I ended up at the list I currently have. So there are 3 factors that I consider when I'm trying to figure out if I think a game is truly competitive. The first one is the use of skill in the game. The skill factor really comes down to things like how interesting are the decisions that you have to make in the game, how much room is there for players to sort of expand their skill ceiling or to show deep or interesting plays to less experienced players that show them the depth of the gameplay, and how much room is there for skill expression in the game versus how much does luck play a factor in whether or not you win. The next factor is balance, and balance is really looking at how the publisher is sort of managing the game. How well is it balanced? How much room is there for deck builders to sort of find their own rogue strategies and bring that to the table, creating an interesting and intricate metagame? How well are things like ban lists handled? Does the company make player-focused, player-first decisions that support the balance of the metagame without sort of draining wallets of players and things like that? And how does the publisher handle formats? Do they have a range of formats to play in that keeps gameplay more diverse for players? And how well are those balanced as well? And then finally, I think a very simple one, organized play. Just talking about how is organized play handled? Is there a clear road from the bottom to the top from the publisher? How much does the publisher care about organized play? What does their prizing look like? Is it sort of supporting people who want to play as competitively as possible, or is the prizing putting players off of really getting serious about the game? I think all of those factors are very important. Not every game is going to hit all of them, so keep that in mind. You might see a game on my list and go, well, that doesn't have a very balanced metagame. Well, it might have other things that I think outweigh that. And with that explained, let's move on to the list. The number 5 game on my list of top 5 competitive TCGs is the UniVersus CCG. Now, the UniVersus CCG is actually one of the current longest running CCGs out there, starting as Universal Fighting System, going through several publishers to UVS Games where it's at right now. And UniVersus is a wonderful game for competitive players because it is extremely deep. Out of all of the TCGs I've played, UniVersus has one of the sort of the deepest and highest skill ceilings to reach. There are so many options. The game is mechanically designed to be very, very open to how you play it, how you deck build. This is one of the few games where players really very early unlocked the concept of ratios over raw numbers. Players will regularly play over the deck limit in this game. When you're coming into it from a game like Magic, it can seem insane, but it's a game that is so deep and rewarding in deck building and how you can try and eke out the correct numbers of things by adjusting numbers all over your deck, going above deck limit, going at deck limit. It's all kind of very freeform, and the way you play the game is also through a resource system that doesn't hold your hand at all. From basically turn 2 onward, anything in your hand is free game. You can regularly make difficult decisions to make checks that might be high risk, high reward. All that kind of stuff is open to you, and I think it ultimately culminates in what is, I think, one of the deepest play experiences right now. Now, I think UniVersus does have a route to the top that's quite clear and has done some serious cash prizes in the past as well. I will say that I think their organized play system is not currently as robust as some other games, but they are sort of expanding their format options right now as we speak. UVS Games has just announced their new rotation system and their new format system, and I do think they are making it very viable for players to get in and start getting competitive. It's previously been sort of quite a tight-knit community and a smaller community that's been growing since they adopted the My Hero Academia license. And I think it is definitely a game to look at if you're looking for an experience where you can just jump in and get competitive and start having fun. It does take a little bit, I think, to get decent at the game. It is sort of an intimidating game to learn because there's so much going on at any time, but I think that also makes it quite rewarding as well. And one final thing to mention is that UniVersus has also had very good support for webcam play historically, including doing some of their higher level events, their regionals on webcam as well, which is really great for people who want to play competitively but have trouble finding events that they can actually attend at the higher level to kind of get them on that track to getting to Worlds or whatever. So for all those reasons, I think UniVersus is an excellent competitive game to jump into, and that is why it is the number 5 game on the list. Now, our number 4 game on the list is Grand Archive TCG. This is definitely the newest game on the list, and thus the caveat here is that it is still proving itself, so keep that in mind. But what Grand Archive's publisher, Weebs of the Shore, has been showing so far and what they've been doing at their high-level events has really been, I think, paving the way for this game to have a lot of potential, and it's one you might want to look at getting into sooner rather than later if you do agree and think that the potential is there like we do. So Grand Archive gets on this list because, again, mechanically, a lot like UniVersus, it is a game that is quite competitive in its basic structure. The Grand Archive game, a lot like UniVersus, does allow you to play things fairly freely from your hand. It doesn't use a hard one resource per turn system like some other popular games do right now, which means that from the very first turn, your options are fairly wide open. There is some escalation and there are some cards that are held off until later in the game, and it's up to the player to decide how they want to use the risk-reward resource system to figure out if those cards are good to risk early on to play earlier stuff or hold on to make sure they have them in the late game. I think any game that has more degrees of freedom with how you play cards and offers a nice risk reward system automatically has quite a deep and inherently more competitive play style to it, where I think it's quite possible, on the flip side, for players coming in with less experience and less tuned decks to get blown out by decks that are quite a bit more competitive. I do think that's actually an issue that happens in both UniVersus and Grand Archive and on a number of other games on this list as well, as you'll see. But I think in a way that's the cost for having a game that is super intricate at the top end. A few things Grand Archive is doing that I think really show its competitive prowess is the addition of the Omni decks, which is just rolling out in beta now and should be fully available very soon. The Omni decks and Grand Archive's ELO system really calls back to the old systems of Magic the Gathering during its competitive heyday. It allows players to build their score through playing both local and higher level events, with higher level events rewarding higher score, and aggregates both an ELO ranking and some veterancy rankings that allow players to sort of build up to rewards as they're just playing event after event, and encourages people to get to their locals and play as many events as possible. I think a game with a strong ranking system is obviously one where competitive play is an important thing, and on top of that, Grand Archive is doing very, very nice things with their way they are watching ban cards and handling what they call proxy as vault. We did a whole video on that that's linked down below that you can check out, but basically Grand Archive uses a lot of transparency with what cards are looking at potentially being banned, and the proxy as vault system allows players to actually print out proxy versions of completely new cards and play with the proxies at competitive events, which is a way that Weebs of the Shore is able to keep the game a little more balanced by adding cards to the metagame that players can access, so they can have answers to overperforming decks or buff up underperforming decks. Systems like Proxy as Vault show me that Weebs of the Shore is very interested in players having access to the ability to play the game as competitively as possible, and is not simply looking to sort of milk money out of its player base. And I think that is the hallmark of a game that really cares about you playing the game competitively. And on top of all that, Grand Archive sort of cops, again, Magic's old systems, with sort of open invite tournaments that are similar to Grand Prix called Ascents that players are able to attend. Earn invites to national tournament, and then at the national tournament, players will earn invites to Worlds. And at Worlds, there will be a big open side Ascent event while all of the invited players get to play at the top level. It's a clear path from the bottom to the top that allows players to get involved, know how to start, know where to compete, and can still attend the biggest events and engage in the community, even if they didn't make it to an invite one year. So it's an excellent system, and we are really looking forward to seeing how Grand Archive moves forward. They have a lot of nice stuff in place, and that's what puts them currently at our number 4. All right, the number 3 on the list, and you either expected this or you are going to post a hate comment down below. I'm not sure which one, but it is Magic the Gathering. Look, I know Magic is bigger than it's ever been, and it gets a lot of hate online because there's simply more players. And also, I mean, I'm going to be honest, Wizards does not make the best decisions. Look, I didn't put it at number 1 or number 2. I don't think it deserves those spots, but Magic still has a place on this list because even though their focus has shifted a little more to casual play and to collectibles and all this kind of stuff, there is still a great competitive game built into there that does have regional events. It does have a pathway to Worlds. And I think most importantly for Magic, the thing that makes it a good competitive game to get into is that you can sit down at your computer or even on your phone right now and get competitive with the game because there's a pathway from both Magic Online and Magic Arena to actually playing physical Magic at the World Championship level. Players are able to get invites to Pro Tours through particular events on Magic Online and Arena, which means that this is the only TCG that has a digital to physical competitive link like that. And that is definitely worth talking about, I think. Ultimately, the best games on this list really are copying what Magic did in the past. And it's really hard not to put Magic on the list when it basically started everything on this list in the first place. It is still going strong. It still has competitive play. It is the easiest game to find competitive tournaments for because it is absolutely everywhere. And because of that, I don't think I could avoid putting it on this list. But it felt wrong to put it before some of the less proven games like Grand Archive or some of the games that are really just kind of building that competitive route out right now like UniVersus. So 3 felt like the right spot for it. Please let me know in the comments how much you disagree with that if you do, but I think it's a pretty reasonable place to put sort of the granddaddy of all card games. And it's really hard to not at least give it a little bit of respect as a game that is certainly the easiest one just to get out there and start playing competitively, even if it's maybe less likely that you make it to the top just because of how many, good Magic Pro players there are out there still. But that is my number 3, Magic the Gathering. My number 2 competitive TCG that you should be looking at if you're looking for a new competitive experience is Pokemon TCG. What's there to say about Pokemon? I mean, we all know the game. It's been around for a long time, and honestly, it hasn't changed all that much other than the numbers just kind of getting bigger and bigger over time. I went through a good stint last year playing Pokemon TCG Online on my Twitch channel, and I had a lot of fun actually exploring the game and understanding where the competitive play really exists in this game. Pokemon is a weird game because the competitive decks look nothing like the very starter decks look like. Competitive Pokemon, ultimately a lot like some of the other games on this list, competitive decks will blow non-competitive decks out of the water. It's not even a contest. But Pokemon lives in this interesting niche where its gameplay is highly focused on sort of finding the right cards with decks full of ways to draw cards and search, tutor for your deck for certain things, and get those consistent combos out as quickly as possible. In that way, Pokemon really reminds me, and I've gotten blowback for this before, but I really stand by this. It reminds me of vintage Magic the Gathering, a format where you, from the very start of the game, have a game plan and you're going to try and pull it off, and you have lots of powerful cards in your deck that help you enable that game plan right away. You're going to spend a lot of time drawing cards, searching for things, shuffling things, and it ends up being a positioning game of trying to math out how to get your win on the opponent. Now, I think Pokemon deviates from vintage after the first couple of turns, but it really does have some of that feel to it. And what I found was that playing Pokemon competitively had a really interesting brain space of I'm trying to figure out what my opponent's going to do in their next turn and in a couple actions and do some really wild positioning, retreating, moving a Pokemon around to try and be the one to kind of get ahead of them on the clock and stay ahead of them on the clock as the game goes through. So I think Pokemon's not only a fun game to play at the competitive level, but also has a very unique niche that I think is going to appeal to certain competitive players more than others, as well as being sort of built in a way with like the weakness and resistance systems, where there are definitely rogue decks that can kind of come out of nowhere if a meta is very predictable and prove themselves very powerful. Sometimes even just rogue cards. One of the interesting headspaces you get into with this game is, you know, if there's a particular rogue card that beats your deck, how many copies is my opponent running? Because I see everyone running one, but then you get the clever player who runs 2 copies of it. You work your whole game to get rid of 1 copy and the second one comes down. That's a very rewarding experience for the player who was calling the meta, and a very rewarding experience for the player who called the call to the meta. When you start getting that deep with decisions, that's when I start thinking, okay, this is a game where competitive play is actually quite interesting. And I think the biggest boon of the Pokemon TCG is how well it gets younger audience into the competitive game. It is a game you can play with people of any age, and kids who are young still have their own divisions to play in, all the way up to world championships. So it does a great job of engaging people of all ages playing the game competitively, and I think that's definitely worth noting and worth saying. And if you're someone who has little ones that you want to play TCGs with, I've had many local friends I know take their kids to Pokemon and get them into the world of TCGs, even playing competitively, traveling to regionals with their kids through Pokemon's really, really nice division system. So wonderful game. It'd be hard not to include on this list. And just like Magic, it's so easy to find local Pokemon players that it basically has to be part of the list. So that's my number 2 game, Pokemon TCG. All right, and the number 1 best game to play competitively right now, I have to give it to Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood is a rising star in the TCG industry that has done very well coming from just before the pandemic, making it through the pandemic and pushing ahead, really on the back of taking all of the ideas that Magic abandoned long ago and re-implementing some of them and improving some of them. Flesh and Blood, a lot like some of the first games on this list, has a very open play system and a high motion of cards in your deck, allowing you to see a lot more of your deck and allowing you to implement strategies and, importantly, plan for later turns a lot more easily, because you have some predictability of, I can hold off until I see this card, I just need to defend, I just need to get to this combo, I just need to try and set this card in my arsenal and set this combo up. I think Flesh and Blood is a wonderful, wonderful game to play for the competitive-minded player. They are also doing some very cool things with how they are managing their game. Things like the Living Legends system is a really fun way to make sure decks don't get powerful for too long. Effectively, as a hero wins more and more tournaments, eventually they will tick up this counter until they become a Living Legend, and then they sort of retire off to a Living Legends category and are no longer legal for play. But of course, there's a format where Living Legends are legal for play for the players who want to play with the highest power level stuff in the game. This creates a pseudo rotation in the game, keeping things fresh, allowing new decks to kind of jump in and experience a format where they aren't just being oppressed by strong decks that have existed for a long time. Very creative system, and I'm a huge fan of that. Additionally, they support a wide range of formats, which makes it very fun to get into playing it competitively. Classic Constructed, Blitz, and Draft are all very supported formats, and of course you have that Living Legends format as well for the people who want to play more legacy-style Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood is a very cool game that I think definitely deserves a look. Unlike some of the other games on the list, it may be a little more dependent on your location, whether or not you can find people to play, but if you want to play one of the best competitive games right now, and the style of Flesh and Blood appeals to you, it is definitely a game worth trying to get a locals started. So go hit up your LGS and ask about those. Flesh and Blood is really one of the few games to come out in the last, 10 years that strongly pushed competitive play, and it has really succeeded. It's got an audience who really loves it, who take it seriously, who want to play it competitively, and it's a wonderful community that if you want to get in and enjoy it, I think you really will. So that's my number 1 pick, Flesh and Blood. Ultimately, all 5 of the games I went through today are, I think, exceptional picks if you're looking to play a card game competitively. You should look at all of these, check your LGS, ask them what they've got going on. If there's a game you like from this list, talk to your LGS about getting it going if you don't already have a local community for it, because these are all wonderful games, and I do think all of these will be around for a while, and ones that you should definitely look at jumping into, because once you start getting into that competitive scene, meeting people and leveling up your experience, if you're a competitive player, you will have an absolute blast with any of these 5 games. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Now stay tuned. We are also going to have a top 5 casual TCGs list coming very soon. Completely different criteria for that one. Totally different. Is Austin Powers going to be on it? I don't know. You'll have to come back and see. Leave a comment down below with what you think the top 5 competitive TCGs are, where my list was wrong, or where your list is right. I would love to hear it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and we will see you in the next one.